Co-funded by the European Parliament, Pop the Vote works with young artists in 13 EU countries to act as changemakers in their communities and mobilize them to participate in the European elections in 2024. It is a project by Culture Action Europe. In the upcoming hour, Maya Weisinger of Culture Action Europe will be in conversation with Noelia Martín-Montalvo of Maastricht Institute of Arts about her work, the importance of art and culture as a political language, civic engagement through art, and the important role that young creatives play in shaping the future of Europe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maya Weisinger, and I am the Projects and Communications Manager at Culture Action Europe. Culture Action Europe is an intersectoral network of cultural networks, organizations, artists, activists, and policymakers. And we are the port of call for informed debate and opinion on cultural policy in the EU. We believe that culture should be put at the heart of public debate and of decision-making. And we do this in a number of ways, one of the ways being advocacy at the EU level with our interlocutors in the EU institutions, and through our projects, of which we are here to talk about today, our new project, Pop the Vote, Culture on the Ballot, which engages young artists in creating impact in their communities. We will work with 52 changemakers to engage in topics that they find important and just very important for their futures. So today I have such a change maker, Noelia Martín-Montalvo, who will be speaking us today about her artwork and about her impact on the communities that she serves. Hello, Noelia.
Hi, Maya. Thank you so much for having me here. I am very glad to be part of Europe Day once again this year. And I'm very happy and excited to start conversating about my experience as young artist in Europe. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Great.
I am a third-year student from the Maastricht Institute of Arts. I am an interdisciplinary artist, so I'm studying interdisciplinary arts. And my work is mostly focused on socially engaged projects with communities that are in the front lines of the climate change crisis. So, for the past years, in starting my career as an artist in the European Union, I have the opportunity to delve in different kind of socially engaged projects, for example, decolonization projects. But last year I was commissioned by Culture Action Europe to work with a community from the European Union which was underrepresented, and I did this with the participation of young Europeans who were experiencing eco-anxiety. And the final result, we presented it last year in Europe Day 2022. And it was a very nice performance. So I'm very excited to keep on talking about this project.
Yeah, thanks. I actually had the pleasure to watch your performance last year, of course. And it was really amazing how you amplified the voices of marginalized communities, especially around the climate emergency that we're experiencing right now. I'm curious to hear how your work has evolved since last year, and what are you working on now, and how are you thinking about your artistic practice?
Well, definitely my work for Amplify, which was the name of the project last year, Amplify, Make the Future of Europe Yours, was a starting point in my career. I am just at the beginning of my artistic career, and a lot has developed since last year's experience. And now I'm very interested in working with underrepresented communities, European, but also non-European, and as I said, who are at the front lines of the climate crisis. I am now, for example, working on a film project with an indigenous community from the Bribri indigenous community from Costa Rica. And yes, I am trying to research the role of women in cultural and natural heritage and how mediums like film and photography can help these communities in maintaining culture and also preserving their environment. So yes, a lot has happened, and I'm very excited to see what I have for the upcoming years to present.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see your work, and everything you've told me so far. It seems super interesting. But I'm really interested in the methods that you used and the artistic approach that you had. And why do you think it's important to use the arts or use an artistic lens to unpack some of these issues, especially around the climate crisis?
Yes, so I think the climate crisis is something that, as a young European and as an artist, I couldn't leave out from the topics that I work on. I think it's an umbrella problem that has a lot of different impacts in different areas, and we should address more of the discourse behind its effects. So, for example, last year I focused on the project of eco-anxiety, so the frame of climate change and its effects in mental health. And this year it was more with indigenous communities and their role in preserving nature and how we can learn from their traditional knowledge and their ancestral practices. So as an artist, I think it's important to address those problems that are pressing for many. Definitely working with the communities that are affected by its effects, I think is the most efficient way to find solutions when we look really at the needs that these communities really struggle communicating to the wider public. So the methods that I use are usually participatory storytelling, which is basically working on the stories of the community and finding ways to, empower them and see how to navigate those stories into a specific form that is, great for them to explore using different mediums that are, let's say, attractive for the wider public, and see if we can start conversations with the people that can make solutions, the people that can support those people. So it's really work around strengthening the own community and giving them the opportunity to tell their own stories and become change makers through giving visibility of the work that they do and hopefully finding legal change. So that's more or less what I see that my work flows.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about your role as an artist in this space, and you're working at the community level, and in one hand, for artists who also work at the community level, they're not always part of the community that they're working with, and they require a lot of bottom-up approaches, a lot of listening, a lot of work that is really focused on what the community wants and needs. But at the same time, there's a need to communicate this at the political level, and I'm wondering how you balance these two worlds.
Well, I think my role as an artist is to work with a community and give them a space in which they can be heard, they can discuss their needs, and they can create something out of their challenges, out of their needs. And I think what's important from my work is that people really see the value of working together, of trying to see ways in which we can develop a project, an artistic project that is going to be presented to the wider public and that hopefully is going to be heard by the policymakers that can actually have a most effective impact in making those needs be tackled. But so I think it's a process in which the person really expands, how to approach problems. For example, last year, when I was working for the eco-anxiety project, my community, my participants were already really engaged in the climate crisis context. They were part of climate groups. They were really active. They were up to date with the information of what was happening, the violations of the environment that were happening at the local, but also at the global level. Somehow, they still didn't have this space in which they could, let's say, communicate their fears and what they were dealing with all this information. I think we need to acknowledge, and we have also had a hint after the pandemic what was all mental health about. And we are now very exposed to a lot of inputs in our daily lives. But of course, this problematic of the climate crisis, it was something inevitable that I wanted to work on last year. Because if we were in a space like this, talking about the future of Europe, how can we work thinking about those things if there are people who cannot even think about a future where there is no destruction, no violation of rights and the environmental rights? So it was very interesting to see that for them being part of an artistic project in which they could translate their fears, their worries, and the grief into an artistic form that was naturally already there. So, for example, when we start working on the project, I realized that my participants use as coping mechanism writing. So what I did was to, adapt myself and see how we could work in the frame of writing. And I asked them to write a poem in which they were going to talk about their worries, their fears, and they knew that this was going to be heard in Europe Day. So, of course, they were really courageous to really explain in a poetic form all their ideas and their fears and nightmares. And after that, we came together and we merged it into one. So we took the pieces, the extracts from each poem that we most liked, and we merged it into one. And then we, I was so amazed by the fact that at the beginning my participants were super shy and super scared of, being part of such a big thing, of presenting this into the European public and being heard by the people that can actually make the legal change. So, of course, they took this responsibility and they overcame this fear of being listened, and they recorded their own voices. And what we did was an audio collage that was, the main artwork. I was in the presentation just holding some cardboards in which I was just highlighting some of the key aspects of this performance of this audio. So for me, it was a very important moment in my artistic life, because I realized that no matter what are your, let's say, tools and materials, you can always work on something when you have a story that matters. And we need to acknowledge that we are more, our stories matter more than we think, and creating those spaces is the most important thing. So, yeah, I think it was a very great experience for my participants because they were now more engaged into looking at different ways, different perspectives on how to navigate the climate crisis and the climate fight in a way that was going to be more, let's say, less stressful, or they wouldn't feel that they were putting a lot of effort for nothing. They were just in the strikes, screaming and whatever, but there was no actual change. But this was tangible. This was something that people would experience. So,
do you think this shifted the idea for some people around their relationship or their knowledge around EU institutions and their ability to engage in dialogue at a higher level, at a European level?
I think yes. I think they realized, they were surprised that the European Union was, interested in this kind of approach of putting artists into working with communities at a local level to represent their voices, but working with them. And I think for me it was also an experience because I realized that perhaps culture is a very nice bridge to merge, young generations and underrepresented communities with the political community. I think it was a very nice experience to see how we can, give a solution to this dissociation problem of the European institutions and the local level in an artistic and creative form.
Well, actually, now that I have you here and you were a participant in the Amplify project, I'm wondering, on the flip side, what were the challenges of making the voices of your community heard, of bringing your artwork to the forefront of these discussions that happen at a European level? Do you find a disconnect in how you can communicate to these big institutions that might not understand what's happening directly with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think art plays a big role in society as it really reflects what is happening. And artists have this special talent to create out of the context that we live in. So when we have very difficult situations, when we see that the political situation in Europe is sometimes very complex to navigate, when it's something that still feels very vague and abstract, this European identity, I think projects in which we work together, in which we hear each other, and we realize that we are not that different as we think, I think this really give me a lot of hope in Europe and what art can do for the future of Europe, how it can really, put together or closer the public with the political community.
Well, on that note, I'm curious about your role as an artist, because of course you're working with community and you have impact as the outcome of the work that you're doing. But how do you maintain the integrity of your artistic practice, which may differ from the work of, let's say, community engagement?
Well, I think my work, I try always to adapt myself to the needs and also the curiosity of the community. What do they want to navigate? What are their interests? For example, when I was doing this project in Costa Rica with this indigenous community, I saw that there was already a huge interest from the younger generations with the technological devices. So they were having smartphones, but how they were using it was really what would make impact in the future. So for me, it was interesting to see that there was this cultural loss in this specific community. And I try to, explain or give them another point of view in how they could use those tools as a form to maintain their cultural heritage and their cultural and traditional knowledge. We did a lot of workshops with them on how to use cameras, film, but also smartphones to document their culture and how to, protect what is there. And I thought that was a beautiful example that sometimes we don't need much to do a bigger impact. I think when we just start to create a space for conversations, whether it's individually, whether it's with a wider group, but sharing it to the world, sharing this process, and that there is a will to change something behind, I think that's the most important thing. And in my artistic practice, that's something that I really want to keep doing. I think we still have a lot of stories to tell in this world, especially in the context of the climate crisis, at the European level and at the non-European level, because at the end, we need to acknowledge that this is an umbrella problem that affects us all around the world. And what happens in Africa or in Asia might also impact Europe. We saw that in the pandemic, so it's inevitable to think about collaborating. Collaborating is such a key role in my artistic practice.
Great. I'm thinking, you're talking about collaboration, and a lot of the work, your artistic practice is really focused on creating this change. And of course, this requires a lot of civic engagement, because a lot of change that can be made also requires the participation of people in democratic processes. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking a lot about the sentiment around the upcoming elections, especially with young people. And we've heard in previous elections, and we continue to hear in this upcoming election, that young people don't always feel like their voices are heard at the EU institutional level, that their votes don't necessarily equate to change or impact in their situation or facing the future that they're facing with all of the weights of our society right now. So I'm wondering your opinion, where do you fall in this discussion, and how do you think we can bridge this gap between the institutions and young people and get people more involved in the democratic process?
Well, yeah, I think that's a huge question for young Europeans, because in my personal experience, I think it's something that I still feel very apart. As a citizen and young person, I feel like the European institutions are very far from me. Perhaps also the fact that we need to think about the political situation at the national, but also at the wider level. It's not something that is clear for most Europeans. How does it function? Or how even some countries look like. I think there's still some work that needs to be done around this European sentiment and the identity of Europeans. I think, I feel like sometimes a lot of young Europeans have this feeling that they're part of something, but they don't really know how the play. So let's say the how does it work? It's very complex. So we need to find ways in which we can make this process more tangible and more clear for young Europeans and how they can be part of the solutions. Because taking in account the climate crisis problematic, now we see that a lot of young Europeans are taking the streets and they make strikes. And they make these demands, but they don't feel like they're being heard. So I think a way in which we can start looking at solutions and putting closer the younger community to the political community and involving them more into the democratic process is really making spaces in which we can have a conversation, in which we can set all things into the table and be transparent. I think there's also something to take into account, and is the fact that young Europeans are in another position, in a position where they need to face a lot of situations like not being able to emancipate, not being able to think about a future, and taking in consideration those aspects, trying to think about who is going to be the next candidate, sometimes not aligning with their agenda. So I think it's creating a space where we align those agendas, where we listen to those needs and what can be done. And I know this might be very ambitious, but I see now that culture is a great platform in which we can start those conversations in a creative way, in a way that challenges us and that actually empowers us into rethink how we can do things and how we can navigate the problems that we face. I think, for example, we see that the climate strikes now are a cultural event. Mm-hmm. We see that there are dancers, there are performers, there is fashion, there is art, there is this attention to the media. So how can we attract the wider public and the policymakers to hear our needs? I think art can be a good bridge for that.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in to our next session, which is actually talking about the Pop the Vote project, which, again, we are here to launch today. Pop the Vote is co-funded by the European Parliament and will be giving tools and platforms for young artists to engage in political discourse around the issues that affect them most. Pop the Vote is in 13 countries, so let me see if I can remember. We have Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden. And so from these 13 countries, there will be an open call in September for applicants to send in their applications. And we will eventually have 52 changemakers between the ages of 18 and 30 years old. And these will be artists, student artists, cultural professionals who are really seeking to make change or already making change using art as their tool. So yes, there will be an open call in September, and we hope we get lots and lots of applications. And from there, those who are selected will participate in the Changemaker Playground Camp, which will be a 7-day training full of workshops around civic engagement, around political campaigning, theories of change, artivism, and how to engage in dialogue with EU institutions and how to push for the issues that they care about, especially at the polls. So yes, it's an opportunity to share existing knowledge around how arts and culture is crucial to decision making, not only in Europe, but beyond. Yes, I can't stress enough that the open call is in September, and we'll have, of course, more information about this on our website, cultureactioneurope.org. So you can stay updated there. We also have our social media accounts for Pop the Vote, which is another way that you can stay informed of the process, and hopefully we'll see your applications in September. And I also want to mention that we have 13 Culture Action Europe members who will really act as ambassadors in each of the Pop the Vote countries. So if you're also interested in seeing who else is involved in our cultural ecosystem and who might be the ambassador in your own country, you can also see that at the Culture Action Europe website and get more information there. So yes, this is about the project, and I think now that we've been talking about Pop the Vote, I've been talking to you, Noelia, I've realized that you are a great candidate for the project, and I hope that you apply in September.
I will.
Great. So you've been inspired already.
I am.
Great. Perfect. In the spirit of Pop the Vote and how we really do want to provide these tools and resources to young people to accelerate or to put their work on a different level, and engage with communities. I'm wondering what you think about what artists need to really to spread their work and to really illuminate these issues that they're discussing or trying to work with. What can EU institutions provide to support this work?
Well, I think, first of all, artists have to think themselves now that there's so many problems going on in the world as actors of change. They need to see themselves as a platform, so they should take some responsibility on the stories that they want to amplify in their works. I think today, in my case, I see this importance of giving space to the stories of the people who are suffering the impacts of climate change and all the umbrella aspects that it touches. So I think giving voice to that in my work is a way for me to also be part of the solution of this global problematic. But this can happen in many other topics. So we need to focus on the stories that matter today in order to think about how we're going to redesign our future. How do we want to envision ourselves? What is the role that we envision for Europe to play? And what are those roles that we want to detach from? So it's really about thinking ourselves as catalyzers of stories and promoters of this change. I think when we think about Europe, there is this inevitable value that is democracy and freedom of speech, this union in diversity. And that's something that can only happen when we collaborate with people, when we speak, when we hear, when we create spaces and we work on something that is inherited from this community and put into perspective into the wider public. So, work on this narrative in which we are delegating this platform, this network, and those talents, creative talents, to support people to be creative, to think beyond what is there. And I think that's why the European institutions, should put more interest in the platforms, that in the ways that we are going to amplify the work of those artists, in how we are going to support financially those people who are willing to work with those kind of visions and those ways of working. So I think that is the way that I would say we should navigate this new project of Pop the Vote, working together and listen to each other. And I'm definitely thinking that it will have very, very great outcomes.
Well, thank you for the confidence, and I do hope that we continue to collaborate and that young people feel supported by the process with Pop the Vote, because we really want to infuse in these trainings. I don't want to even call it training, because we want it to be highly collaborative, interactive, that there are skills that we can learn from each other as well, and we're bringing people together that probably already have a wealth of experience to share with others from other countries. So, yes, I hope that we can do this for the Pop the Vote project. And thinking about elections some more, we hear, and we will continue to hear, especially in the 2024 elections, the rhetoric about youth being the future, and putting a lot of the weight of this discussion on what youth reaction and youth will do. But we also know that oftentimes young people aren't at the table, or they have a very limited input into these kinds of conversations, and are either spoken for or don't have the direct communication to how they see the future. So I'm thinking, now that I have you here, I can ask you, what role do you play, and what role do you think young people play in shaping the future of Europe?
Well, I think me as an artist, we play a role, or I play a role in starting conversations with these young generations in what they feel are their needs, and what are the gaps, in order to imagine how to fill those gaps into reaching this, harmonious conversation with the political community. As a citizen, I think I would like to have more facilities to understand what are the impacts that my vote can have in my local and the wider European level. So really put that into perspective, but also, of course, again, this is an inevitable thing, and I think most Europeans, when they have to face to other challenges, such as world that is changing so rapidly, with a lot of inputs, with little support, and many aspects like mental health, like emancipation, like those are definitely problems that when we are building ourselves as an adult, is sometimes difficult to navigate. So of course, making it in an attractive and easy form in order to think, okay, I can be part, I have something to say, because when there's so much information going on, you often feel, insecure about who am I to express my opinion. I think either way, today, everything that we make, every content that we create on social media, on an artistic form, has a political implication. So we are political beings, inevitably. So of course, putting aside all those fears and insecurities can actually lead into beautiful conversations that can really make the impact of the future. So I would say, yes, go ahead and really start having conversations with the people, the older people, the even younger people. So it's not just the people who are able to vote, but also look at the people who are behind you, the people that haven't been born yet, because we have to take in consideration everyone. Everyone shapes the future, and every decision makes a huge impact in the long term. So those are things that I think are more easy if we start being honest to each other.
Super inspiring and very hopeful for the years to come. And hopefully we also see this inspiration at the polls coming up at this year's or next year's election. I think this is all we have for today, but Noelia, thank you so much for joining me in studio today. I'm really looking forward to seeing your work and how it develops. Is there somewhere where we can see your previous work, or in the future maybe we can see the film that comes out?
Well, I cannot really say much about the film yet, but there is my Instagram account. You can follow me, and I'll be sharing all the details from my projects. I really like to share a little bit also of the process during my work project. So definitely look it up, because maybe you get really inspired. And that was something that I would like to say, that you don't need much to make a big impact. Just focus on the field that you feel comfortable with, in the community that you feel represented and identified. And just look at the ways that and the things that really passionates you. And you will make an impact somehow. You will.
Great. Thank you, Noelia. I want to say a quick thank you to European Cultural Foundation for hosting us and hosting this launch of Pop the Vote, Culture on the Ballot. And a thank you to Euradia, who has powered this launch here today. And also, I want to remind everyone that the applications will go live in September, so please stay updated with us, cultureactioneurope.org. You can also find us across all social media. I think today you'll probably see we have hashtag #PopTheVote, so please follow it if you would like more information, and we hope to see your applications for all those changemakers out there who want to be part of the project. I'm Maya Weisinger from Culture Action Europe. Thank you.